are off. Flying through the hallway like a disco moth. Kitchen to the couch, then I loop through the fan. My tiny whoops grooving like a funky jam. I dip through the doorway, spin by the cab, bounce off the toaster, yeah, I meant to do it. Neighbors knocking, saying, what's that sound? It's my brush motor soul train getting down. Flying through the curtain, dancing on breeze. Freestyle funk in my living room with ease. Tiny whoop magic, bumping every wall. I'm the James Brown of flight. Can't stop it all. I got LED strobes and a shag rug trail. I'm looping through the lava lamp, leaving a tail. My whoops got rhythm, my sticks got soul. I'm the pilot of the party. On a roll, TV remotes a gate, the lamps a dive. I'm flying like it's 75. No GPS, no rules, no shame. Just a funky little quad in a soul train frame. Below, we fly that flow. Below, spread that gap. No time to nap. No time to nap. Hit that roll. Funk and control. Funk and control. Bounce that wall. Bounce that all. We fly it all. Funk it all. We fly it all. Tiny whoop love, funky and free. We fly indoors, we fly with glee. Whoop it, loop it, groove it, move it, bounce it, flip it, funk it, rip it, fly that soul, don't lose control. Tiny whoop love gonna make you whole. I thread the needle through the vinyl stacks, bounce off the mirror ball, never looking back. My quad's got soul, it's got style, it's got sass. It dips through the incense like a blast from the past. I'm flying figure eights through the lava lamp glow, dodging house plants like a funky pro. My whoops got rhythm, my sticks got heat. I'm the pilot of the party with the grooviest beat. I loop through the hallway, I dive by the broom. I'm the disco ghost in your living room. I hit that split, it's over grandma's chair. She just claps and says, boy, you got flair. I'm flying freestyle with a velvet touch. My quad so smooth it don't need a clutch. From the shag rug to the ceiling fan, I'm the funky little fly with a master plan. The curtains dancing on the breeze. Freestyle funk in my living room with ease. Tiny whoop magic bumping every wall. I'm the James Brown of flight. Can't stop at all. Can't stop at all. Can't stop at all.
Greetings, my name's Aaron Ciotti. Welcome to Sunday Q&A. What's on the floor? Carpet. Oh no! A big chunk just came out of, oh god. A big old chunk just came out of the carpet. Oops. I gotta get one of those mats, man. This carpet's ruined. I didn't put one of those mats down for under my chair. And what is this big slit in the carpet? There's a big cut. Welcome to Sunday Q&A. We are going to be diving into a bunch of different motors on the Meteor75. Here we go. The BetaFPV Meteor75 V Pro V2 O4 wide. Got it. That's the name of it. It comes with a phenomenal set of BetaFPV's new 1102 21,000 motor kV motor, but there are 3 other motors that might be a better choice and or a different choice better maybe for you specifically. There really is no such thing as better for everybody. There's just different. But yeah, we've got an RC and Power 1003 actually, which is 22,000 kV. We've also got the GEP-RC 1002 25,000 kV, and then we've got the old school BetaFPV 1102 22,000 kV. Their new 1102 is 21,000 kV, but it certainly seems like it makes more power than the old one. But we're gonna do a little bit of testing on that today. I've got a little setup here that allows me to run a Toolkit RC P200 adjustable power supply with 4 volts output all the time. And I can hook that up to this for a completely steady source of voltage. We're going to bolt 4 different motors up to this, and we're going to spin each one of them up to look at what the actual KV is, because every manufacturer has a slightly different way that they measure KV. So it's really tough to compare KVs between BetaFPV and HappyModel and RC and Power and Newbie Drone. And then we're also going to do a power test where we leave a propeller on them, we hold the quad, go full throttle, see what kind of RPM it turns. These are ways of testing motors and propellers that any of you can do. And I think that you should, because the more of this that we all do collectively, the more data that we're going to have to kind of dive into. And we end up learning a lot. Like when we do this stuff sort of collectively, and it's not just me doing it, and you know, I do share the data. I have a whole bunch of Google Sheets documents with a lot of the data from the testing that patrons have access to for $3 whole a month, which is 10 cents a day or like 20 cents per live stream. I guarantee you that I've saved you more than $3 a month by telling you a lot of stuff that sucks in this micro world. And so, but when you guys also join in on that testing, it really it just helps so much. And it's really, really nice to see other people back some of this stuff up, because as we all know, in the FPV world, quality control is rough. And so, you know, I do a bunch of testing on this AIO, for example, and the motor that I have on motor 2 doesn't do all that great, but then one of you tests the same motor and it does really good. Okay, well, that possibly means that channel 2 on this particular AIO that I've got is weak, or maybe the other 3 channels on your AIO are weak, and it makes that one look artificially better. We are going to test that. The first thing that I'm going to do, I have left this as is with this is basically that Meteor75 Pro V2 stone stock, but with a motor, a propeller swap and an antenna swap, but mainly it's just a different set of propellers. It's a matched set of propellers right now, and I've got all 4 of these motors on, and so the first thing that you always want to do is get a control to try to isolate your AIO not being on its way out. And so the first thing we're going to do is spin each one of these motors up and look at the RPM to make sure that there's not one motor or ESC channel that's a little bit weak. If there is, we're going to take, let's say that it's motor 2 that doesn't do so well here, but they're all the same motors. If one of these is weak, I'm going to take the weak one and take one of the strong ones and swap them. And then if the problem chases, then the issue is with the motor. If the problem stays on that channel, the issue is with that ESC channel. That is fairly common, especially in the tiny whoop world. We're asking a lot of these manufacturers to put all the things onto one single board. And ESCs are under a lot of stress, and so it's very easy for an ESC to have one channel or just one FET. You know, like an ESC has 12 FETs on it, 3 per channel. And so if one of those FETs is not totally up to par, that channel is going to suffer. And so it's really important to kind of try to isolate that out a little bit. I've got a little bit of a mess here. I've had to pull a couple builds apart to rob these motors off of them. And so I've made a bit of a mess over here in doing that. But I'm about to be ready to go. I just have to unplug this here and then plug in my magical little cable, and away we go. If you want to do this for yourself, the Toolkit P200 adjustable power supply is an awesome tool. It comes with these alligator clips. You can't just run a BT 2.0. For some reason, the voltage that comes out of this is not stable enough. You have to put something in line. I did it super janky, but it absolutely works. This is a FPV cycle capacitor with spike reducer. You probably don't need the spike reducer here. You probably just need a capacitor. And so you could just, like, you know, put a capacitor in line here and it would probably be totally okay. When I had this set up without the capacitor, the AIO would like power up and then it would like glitch and then it would power up again. It would just sit there like did-it. And so when I put this little capacitor in line here, it completely fixed that issue. So let me get this voltage turned down to 4 volts. I do all of this testing at 4 volts because after about 10 seconds of flying, pretty much any tiny whoop, you're at about 4 volts. So I think 4 volts... 4 volts is not like any kind of like an industry standard for testing KV or anything like that, but 4 volts has been what I've always used. So all of my testing, you know, I do the testing to try to be as realistic as possible, and I chose that 4 volts a long time ago, and so all of my testing is universal for sort of that. On one hand, like, I kind of wish that I'd picked a more industry standard number for testing KV, but to be honest, there's so many variables that it really wouldn't have mattered. There are way too many variables between me testing and then somebody else testing, you know, each manufacturer, and like, I don't feel bad about it either because the manufacturers can't even agree on a voltage. HappyModel tests at a drastically different voltage than everybody else. And so if the manufacturers can't even make up their damn minds on this, how am I supposed to, right? Hey, I was doing a Flywoo order, and I snagged one of their 25 mini frames here. This is a 2.5-inch frame with a really nice rubber dampened camera mount set up here. So you're gonna see this in the future. I think I'm actually gonna try to pick up a Pro, a DJI O4 Pro with this build. We'll see how big of a motor it takes. It's gonna be a cinematic build. This frame is not gonna be strong enough to really crash hard with the weight of an O4 Pro and then the motors and the battery that's gonna take to move that thing around. But this should be kind of cool. See what kind of performance we can get from a soft-mounted camera setup here in the front in terms of how gyroflow does. So stay tuned for that if you're interested in this. You know, this frame is pretty cheap. The bind and fly for this, I don't necessarily understand. I don't... They went with 3S, but they went with motors that are way too small. And so I wouldn't recommend that you get the bind and fly of this unless you plan on changing the motors out. But then what are you going to do with the motors that it comes with? If you can come up with a plan for the motors that it comes with, the rest of it is fine. The AIO, everything else is great on this. So yeah, maybe buy the bind and fly. But if you're going to buy, but expect to swap the motors out. The motor selection for the Firefly 20, is it Firefly? Yeah, the Firefly 25 mini and 20 mini. The motor selection is good for the 20, but the motor selection is not good for this 25. You need a much bigger motor for this guy. And so, yeah, just keep that in mind. The frame itself, though, is fairly inexpensive, and it's pretty well designed. I wish the base plate was a little bit thicker, to be honest. And as always, I wish that it had removable arms. But yeah, it's pretty good. And the camera mounting sled here is really nice. It's pretty difficult to get these grommets in, but you just sit there on the couch while you're watching a show or a movie and just try for a half an hour, and eventually you'll get it. So yeah, some stuff coming with this guy. I forgot to show this off the other day when when I was opening the box from Flywoo, because that wasn't the main thing that I was getting from Flywoo. I was mainly getting the AIO and the ND filters as well. BetaFPV sent over an extra 75 Pro frame and an extra 75 Pro canopy. So these will be in Monday night's, tomorrow night's giveaway. Tomorrow night we do our first Monday of every month giveaways. And so if you're interested in this guy, which is what you were watching on the intro, you can start to get one step closer to this build. If you show on up tomorrow night, it's going to be, that's going to be on the Tiny Whoop and Toothpick tier, which is the first giveaway that we do, the first of 4 giveaways that we do. The first 3 giveaways are for patrons. For $5, $10, or $15 a month, you can get in on those giveaways. $5 a month for Tiny Whoop and Toothpick tier, $10 a month for 3-inch micro brushless tier, $15 a month for 5-inch tier. If you only fly 5-inch, then just enter the 5-inch giveaways and you'll win 5-inch stuff. If you only fly 3-inch big power rigs, only, you can specifically, this is me trying to get you something you're actually going to use, right? I haven't won many things in life, but it feels like every time I win something, it's something that I don't really want, and I can't really use. And so this is my way of trying to get around that. If you really want to support the hell out of me and you have an extra $1 a day, there's a $30 a month tier that'll enter you into all of those. So you'll be entered into all 3 of those giveaways every first Monday of the month. You don't have to be on the live stream. You just have to join the Patreon. The link is over on CiottiFPV.com, or just search Patreon for CiottiFPV. You'll find me on there. In continuation of our discussion from Friday's live stream about upgrades to this Meteor75 Pro V204 wide, I've now tested a couple of different propellers, and I'm going to show you that flight footage now. On the intro, you were watching the HQ 45mm propeller. By the way, patrons, you guys have access to an edit that I threw together yesterday with the best battery that I flew on this in its stock configuration. Stock-ish. I did the build a little bit differently than BetaFPV. I used a slightly longer O4 to AIO cable so that I could rotate the VTX in a different way, in a way that I sort of prefer. I rotated the AIO so that the battery is in the front here, and what that allows me to do is push the battery farther back when I mount it to offset the nose heavy weight of the camera. And so with the battery plug in the front here, I can push the battery all the way back, and now more of the battery weight is in the rear, which is going to offset more of the camera, well, all of the camera weight, which is in the front. And so that's going to make this thing not nearly as nose heavy, and it absolutely makes a difference. That's a trick that I figured out years ago with my little RC drift car chasing rig. And so, yeah, it's a stock build, though, like stock frame, stock motors. It had stock propellers on it, but just with a couple different building things. And I also put little rubber grommets on the VTX to just a little bit more soft mount it to this canopy in case there's a really hard hit. It's nice to have electronics on some sort of a rubber mounting so that if there's a huge impact, the rubber mounting has a little bit of give to it, versus if you have it solidly mounted, that whole hit is getting sent right into the electronics. And as we know, the O4 light stuff is certainly not indestructible. I would not call it fragile. I would call the walk snail light fragile. The O4 light is not fragile. It's just not durable. It's somewhere in between. So, yeah, there's an edit with the best battery that I've put in so far on this thing, and there's some jitters. Unfortunately, that battery was flown, with the stock Gemfan 1811 props, a set of them that were a little bit beat up. I'd put like 4 batteries in a row. I'd had no real hard crashes, but these props are a little fragile. The blades bend very easily on these propellers. They're really well balanced, and they perform incredibly well, and they're super lightweight. And so I really like these props. I think these are the best 1.8-inch props that exist. But in the chase of lightweight, they've sacrificed a little bit of durability. And so, like, even on light crashes, these blades will bend upwards typically a little bit. And now the propeller wobbles, and it sends those vibrations up into the camera, and then you'll get like a little bit of trembling here and there. You might be able to get that out with gyro flow, but gyro flow has a tendency to induce its own sort of twitchiness and wobbles sometimes. And so your best bet is always to not use gyro flow, which with a brand new fresh set of propellers, this was fine. I did not see any of those like sort of micro jitters when not using gyro flow. And so on a totally fresh set of these 1811s, this thing is just phenomenal. You can watch the live stream for some proof of that. I played 4 batteries on Friday's live stream from this thing, so you can see exactly what to expect. But yeah, luckily propellers are cheap, so just buy a whole bunch of these, and when you're about to fly like a really pretty cinematic battery, just swap the props out. You have your, basher props, although this isn't really a basher, but it does seem to be relatively durable. Oh god, the other most important modification that I've made is putting E6000 in these slots where you slide the rubber grommets to mount the canopy to the frame. There are 4 rubber grommets, and there are 8 mounting points, 4 on the frame, 4 on the canopy itself. And so on the frame, there's a thing like this, and then the rubber grommet, you mash it flat, and then you put it in there and it stays. Well, if this piece here is opened, on not very hard crashes, those rubber grommets will come out, and you can literally have this entire camera canopy sled, which has a $120, $140 plus camera and VTX in it, separate and just go flying and potentially disappear forever. You're definitely going to lose that flight file because the VTX is going to get unplugged, so it's going to corrupt that flight file. And so, yeah, all you seem to have to do is put a little drop of, not a little drop, but a little wad of E6000 on the openings. Just put it, you have to put the grommet in there first, and then just fill up this opening here with E6000. Just keep squeezing it in until it fills the void, and then it poofs out a little bit. And so you're going to do that 1, 2, 3, 4 times. On the canopy, you have to do that with the canopy off in order to get access to where that gap is on the front mounting point and the rear mounting point. You're going to wait for that E6000 to cure, and then you're going to slot the grommets into the slots in the frame, and then you're going to do the same thing on the frame. 1, 2, 3, 4 to close those holes. And ever since I've done that, I have not had any issues with any of these grommets popping out. Is that annoying as hell from like a what if I crash and have to take it apart standpoint? Absolutely. Is there any other way? I don't think so, right? Like, how do you do this? How do you soft mount your camera and canopy in a way that's easy to work on, but it still has full mobility to move forward, backward, left, right, even a little bit of yaw. You can find just the right thickness. Where is it? I'm trying to get it. There you go. You can see the little hole there. You could try to find just the right thickness screw and nut and put a screw and nut down through the grommet. But now you've got something metal in there, and like no matter what, that metal is going to impede the thing moving around, right? Oh, also up and down, right? It can also move up and down a little bit on the rubber grommets. And so like one way of doing it is to put a screw through there and like with a nylock nut and just barely engage the nylock so that the screw is not tight. You don't want to tighten the screw down and squish anything. That's going to make it not move around even worse. But like no matter what, having something rigid down through the middle of that rubber grommet is going to make it not move around perfectly clean. And we really need it to move around perfectly clean. One of the things that we're learning with gyro flow, and specifically with the gyro change, well, on the O4 Pro DJI changed the gyro. The O4 lights have always had the worst gyro that has aliasing and clipping problems. And so, you know, one of the things that we're learning is how important it is for the gyro trace to be smooth and like not have any weird like maxing out and clipping, or not having any weird aliasing. And if you're going to do that, which this canopy does a brilliant job with, like gyro flow, even on the newer, worse gyro, works beautifully on here. It still does the same thing that it's always been doing, which is that it introduces a little bit of jitter here and there. But yeah, it's really important to have that gyro signal be as basically sinusoidal, I think, as possible. And if you've got a rigid piece down through there, it's gonna like bind up sometimes. And so instead of getting like a nice gyro, you know, wiggle where it goes like this, if there's something in there that's binding up and then releasing, you're gonna get like a little bit of a weird motion. And that's just a recipe for gyro flow to be confused and not be able to deal with that, and or just the footage to look jank, right? Like the camera mount was rotating back and forth, and it rotated like this, and then it had like a little jump. You're gonna see that in the footage. And so yeah, having these rubber grommets be just held on by themselves is tough. It's really tough. And I've been surprised, I've been delighted how well just 8 drops of E6000 have done in holding these rubber grommets in. I'm gonna curse the heavens the first time I have to separate this canopy from this frame, because it's just gonna be annoying to have to get in there and peel that E6000 out on each one and then redo it every single time I put it back together. But look, this is not a basher rig. I know I keep saying this, but this is not. Like, any build that has a camera plate that's just on rubber isolating grommets is never going to be a basher. Even though I don't have to worry about these grommets coming out of the slot, if I grab this canopy and I just pull like this really hard, I guarantee you I can pull these grommets right out of the holes that they're in. And so crashing this thing super hard is never, you know, like on concrete or like bando bashing, it's not it. Like that's not what this is for. You need like a proper tiny whoop with all solid mounted stuff for that. And so yeah, you want to use the tools the way that they're intended. But yeah, so today I tested, I forgot, here you go. Here is the first of 3 batteries that I flew today with different propellers. Up first, these are the HQ 45 millimeter is what they're called. 45 mm X3GR. They're also just called 45 millimeter by 3, 45 millimeter X3. What these actually are is a 1.8 by 0.9 by 3. So 0.9 is fairly low pitch. And by the way, these are the HQ ultralights. These are about the same weight as the Gemfan 1811s. The HQ ultralights used to be lighter than all of the Gemfan props, but there's like 2 or 3 brand new Gemfan propellers. The 1207, this 1811, I forget, I think there's a third one, that are really, really, really lightweight. Unfortunately, in that chase of lightweight, they've lost the durability that they used to have. Gemfan props used to be a lot more durable than the HQ ultralights, but they were heavier, and so they didn't fly as good, but they didn't break. They didn't specifically. It's the HQ ultralight hub. The hub is very fragile, and that's kind of the worst thing to be fragile, because when, not if, with these HQ props, when the hub breaks, you now have a tricopter, but it's a tricopter with one dead motor in a corner, and so it's not flyable, and that's like a recipe for losing an entire quad. So the HQ ultralight props, I will not fly, basically unrecoverable. I will not go up above these trees very often, and I will not go just in places where if a propeller explodes, I'm never going to get the entire quad back. And that makes me fly a little bit different, and that's kind of annoying. These new Gemfan props are a much better... it's a much better sacrifice. They have a hub that doesn't seem to ever fail, but the blades where they attach to the hub is a little bit weak. And so we don't have to worry about these new Gemfan props exploding and losing the entire rig. We have to worry about, after a bunch of crashes, certain propeller blades will be pitched upwards, and then that generates more vibrations, and then the flight footage either has jello or little weird twitches and or vibrations. So progress, massive progress. These new Gemfan props are great. I wish they were a tiny little bit heavier, but with a more of a reinforcement between the propeller blade and the hub. When the Nubidru and Azzy props, for example, have the same issue. The propeller blade runs right into the hub with just the same width of the propeller blade. When manufacturers take the width of the propeller blade and they do this where it meets up with the hub, it fixes that issue. It adds some plastic and it adds weight, but it really helps durability. And so maybe the next generation of propellers that we have will take care of all the things, and then we'll have God's prop that is well balanced, durable, lightweight, good performance, yada yada yada. So that first battery was the HQ 45mm by 3. These next two batteries are the HQ U, like Utah, 1.8 by 1.3 by 3. I had really high hopes for these propellers. They don't seem to be very well balanced. You might be able to see it, you might not be able to see it. YouTube just mangles the quality of these live streams so bad. But both of these HQ props are not as balanced as these new Gemfan 1811s, which is kind of crazy because that's not been the case for a long time. HQ props have always been slightly better balanced than Gemfan. So the tables have kind of turned here. I'm all for it. You know, as we get props that are better balanced, it's not like the old props are getting worse balanced. We're getting better balanced, newer propellers. So this is a really, really good thing. And so, yeah, with both of these HQ ultralight props, I had more jitters, more shaking, more nonsense than with these Gemfan 1811s, which, to be honest, is kind of great. Because the HQ props, you got to really be worried that the hub is going to explode and you're going to lose the rig. The Gemfan props, you don't have to worry about that. The HQ props used to fly better. They were lighter. They were better balanced. Now they're not lighter or they're not better balanced. And so we have, like, the best option, which is these Gemfan 1811s. And so, like, done. You know, as nice as it is to have some variety, it's also really nice when there's one thing that's better in almost all the different ways. And then you just run that, and that's it. And that's what these Gemfan 1811s are. There's another new Gemfan 1.8-inch prop coming. It's not available anywhere yet, so we'll have to kind of wait on that. But, yeah, at the moment, for a 1.8-inch prop, the 1811s are absolutely the way to go. If you want to do a tri-blade. If you want to do a bi-blade, your only real decent option is the HQ ultralight bi-blades. It's a great propeller, but they're fragile. They're going to break. This is why you'll never see me flying a 1.8 inch bi-blade rig. I will switch it to either a 2-inch build or a 1.6 inch build, because in the 1.6 inch size, we have the Gemfan 1610s, which are great and they're durable and they're well balanced. And then in the 2-inch size, we have the Gemfan 2015, which is great and strong and well balanced. So yeah, for a 1.8 inch build on bi-blades, there's not a good propeller. The HQ ultralights fly great, but then they leave you stranded because they just blow up. And that's unacceptable for me. So there you go. There's the continuation of like the upgrade situation here, which is that you can't really, there are no prop upgrades. The props that this thing comes with are the best propellers available for it, which seems kind of annoying to those of us that are obsessed with changing things, but it's actually a really good thing. You know, like it's really nice every once in a while when, like I said, there just is that one thing that is the best in almost every way. And so like for most people, just run that and stop forcing yourself to change everything all the time. These t-shirts are still available over in my Etsy store. It's linked on CiottiFPV.com, or just go to Etsy and search for CiottiFPV. You'll find me. In the chat, Frank Dr. Nicholas was first. YouTube did the thing was next. Uke, Wireless, Jay, The Bruce, Douglas 6, Sporny, Ricardo Penders, Dan and Mr. Clean, Render, Double Oze, Cjo, Phil Bradley, Dannon with a 10-pound super chat. Thank you so much, brother. Double Oze with a 10-pound super chat. Thank you as well. Dannon says, I have an issue with the image in DJI O4 Lite in my new mini whoop. Every time I connect, first time I need to switch DJI 2 goggles to a Vada or other option and come back to DJI O4 Lite to make it work. That's super weird. Do you have another DJI O4 Lite that you can try this on to see if it does it? Because that's going to isolate if this is a goggle problem or if this is a VTX / camera problem. You know what I'm saying? So if you can get your hands on another DJI O4 Lite, that's going to be the best. That's going to like 50-50 your troubleshoot here, right? If you don't, I would confirm that your goggles are on the newest firmware and that the O4 Lite is on the newest firmware as well. That's the only thing that I can think of that might have that might be this issue. Some sort of a weird version mismatch where, like, if you do this weird thing, which I've never heard of before, they'll connect and they'll talk and everything will be fine. I guess the other thing that you can do is try to just like rebind it. That's a super weird issue, Dan, and I've never heard of that before. If you get another DJI O4 Lite and it doesn't act like this, return this DJI O4 Lite. We should not have to work super hard to make things work right out of the box. They should just work right out of the box. They better work right out of the box because we're going to start blasting them into solid objects at 40 miles an hour, and that's going to destroy them. And so if they're half destroyed out of the box, you got no shot. So yeah, you got to start to hopefully isolate that problem. Okay, so I played the flight footage for you from these two propellers. I'm not impressed with either one of them. Even if I was impressed with the way either one of them flew, I would be worried the whole time I was flying them that the hubs were going to explode. If you're desperate to run HQ ultralight propellers because they perform so good, the best thing that you can possibly do to make the hub last longer is to drill it out to the perfect inner diameter. When you have a solid metal motor shaft and then you take a plastic propeller and you push really hard to get that on there, that metal is not going to compress. That plastic is going to be in tension the whole time, and that's going to make it even worse. It's going to want to find a weak point and explode and break. And so really, really, really important for running these HQ ultralight props is to never jam one down on the motor as hard as you possibly can. Not even as hard as you can, just hard. These propellers should go down on the motor shafts with good tension so that they don't fly off, but like 2 fingers tension. If you're using your index finger and your pointer finger, that's too much. You're pushing too hard. If your elbow is creeping up, if you're making faces, that's too much. You're pushing too hard. That propeller is going to explode. On my Etsy store, I have 0.99 and 1.49 millimeter drill bits. I also have this super handy little pin vise to hold these drill bits. And so when you're about to put a propeller onto, here's the other thing, every single one of these motors has a slightly different outer diameter motor shaft. They're not all 1.5000 millimeters. There are ones that are 1.49, there's ones that are 1.51, 1.48, and then all of these propellers have slightly different inner diameters. And so that's why having a precision drill bit that's 1.49 or 0.99 is really important, so that you can make all of your propellers fit the motor shaft perfectly. If the propellers that you're running don't have a hub that explodes all the time, that's half the battle. But here's the other half the battle, is the motors lasting longer. When you slip a bell, when you slip a shaft on the motor where the motor shaft and the bell are not together anymore, that is typically because of you. You pushed a propeller too hard onto the motor, and that's what hurts it. Because we are big and strong and we can impart a ton of force. The bell, the motor bell, and the motor shaft are laser welded together right around here. And so it's only a tiny little area that they can merge these two things. And so it's really easy to push super hard on the propeller, which then pushes down on this motor shaft and breaks that. It's also really easy to spin the propeller. If once you have the propeller on there and now you can't get it off, if you grab the motor bell and grab the propeller, which is like welded at this point to the motor shaft, if you start twisting them, hell yeah, that's a great way to break that laser weld between the motor shaft and the bell, and that motor is now ruined. You're going to get a little bit more life out of it, but then it's going to start spinning the propeller on the bell, and you're going to have to replace that motor. And so it's very annoying, I know, but it's not that annoying, right? Like, drilling these propellers out takes about the same amount of time as it does for us to like remove T-mount screws and then put the T-mount screws into the fresh propeller and then screw it back down. Like, that time you're spending drilling these propellers out, and most of these props last a lot longer than 5-inch props, than 3-inch props, than T-mount, than M5 mount. So it's yes, it's a little bit annoying, but it's yeah, think of it that way, and then it becomes a lot less annoying. And so, yeah, there you go. There's some questions that you didn't ask, but answers that you needed to know, if you're somewhat new here, because we talk about this stuff a lot. Let's dive into the testing. I've played all of the flight footage. I'm now 3 days into flying this thing. I'm still just as impressed. BetaFPV did a ridiculously good job with this. After we do a little bit more testing on this, I'm going to be moving the electronics package over to the Meteor75 Pro frame to see if we can make this thing fly inside the house somewhat comfortably. In order to have a comparison point, I've taken the old Meteor75 setup and I built an O4 narrow sort of indoor rig. I've done this before. This is not very fun, in my opinion, to fly inside. The O4 narrow doesn't have quite enough field of view. The latency of these digital systems is just too much inside. Like, there's so much stuff to hit. You got to be like on it all the time. the little bit of extra digital latency just makes that really difficult. And then the extra weight, the extra 8 grams for an O4 narrow makes this really, really heavy. And so all those things together make this, like, it's flyable inside for sure, but you're just trying to not crash the whole time. You're not actually flying. You're not trying to do big, gnarly power loops. You're just trying to not die. And that's not nearly as fun for me as flying an analog rig and just fucking shredding and just, you know, worrying about, like, can I Matty flip and then transfer that into a power loop in one super clean motion? So, yeah. Moving this to the 65 Pro frame, we're still going to have all that latency. We're still going to have all that weight. We're actually going to have even more weight because this canopy is bigger and this O4 wide camera is heavier. So the weight situation is going to get even worse. But the wide angle, narrow angle thing will be very interesting. I think that the extra weight that we're gaining is going to offset the fact that we have a better camera, a better field of view. But there's only one way to find out. I'm 99% sure that you should buy the Meteor75 Pro 2. I'm almost certain that you should not buy the Meteor65 Pro 04. If nothing else, then the motors that come with the Meteor65 Pro 2 are pretty much worthless because they have a 1mm motor shaft. And something that is this heavy with a 1mm motor shaft is going to just bend those motor shafts all the time, and it's going to drive you completely insane. And so for my build that I'm doing on this with the 65 Pro frame, I'm not going to touch 1mm motor shaft motors. I'm only going to use 1.5mm motor shaft motors, which there aren't many of that are small enough and high kV enough for those small propellers. So it's going to be a little bit of a struggle, but we're going to go for it and see what we can do. The weBLEED tree toppers are the best option here. I don't have a set of those at the moment, but I do have a set of the iGao, the old iGao 802. They initially were 27,000 kV, but I've taken 30 and 33,000 kV stators from other tiny whoop motors and transplanted those iGao bells onto them. They are not quite as high of a kV as the tree toppers. There was something a little bit different done. I don't know what it is on the tree toppers, but they've made more power than these Frankenstein motors that I've made in testing that I've done. But I'm going to get as close as I possibly can, and to be honest, I'll probably snag a set of tree toppers anyway to just get that full picture of, like, what's the best that we can possibly build for flying O4 indoors. This canopy layout may very well be it. The wide field of view might make flying inside a lot more realistic. I'll find out. We'll find out together. So yeah, that's what's kind of coming up. So let's dive into the testing. I'm going to first make sure that this AIO is outputting the right amount of power, the same amount of power roughly per channel. And here's how you do that. We are going to first fire up BetaFlight. And I believe that this AIO shipped with the newer version of BetaFlight. So I have to use the online configurator here, which is a little bit annoying, but it's okay. It's not that bad. And so we need to plug this fella in. All right, I've got a bunch of stuff all over the place here. Hang on a second, because I'm gonna have to fire this thing up over here on the bench, and it's gonna blow things all over the place. Okay. That's looking good. This is looking good. Okay, so we go with this. Get you guys out of the way. Get this guy plugged in. And there we go. All right. We are plugged into the computer. Now we are going to give it a solid 4 volts of power. And we're going to go to the motors tab. And so here comes 4 volts. All right, we've got 4 volts. I'm going to hold the quad on its side here so that it's blowing all of its thrust. Well, no, I'm going to hold it up a little bit, I think. Yeah, there we go. And all we're going to do here is click this switch here. I understand the risks. The propellers are definitely off. Let me fix this monitor. I put some filters on this monitor because I was playing really dark flight footage the other day. There we go. And I'm just going to ramp each one of these motors up, and what we're going to look at is this RPM right here. And so I'm going to zoom you guys in a little bit. And again, you guys can do this. Any one of you can do this at any time. So this is what we're looking for, the little RPM number per motor. Ready? Here we go. 44, 45. 44, 45. 44, 45. 44, 45. Beautiful. That's what you get from a brand new AIO. So we now know that all 4 motors, I mean, okay, look, if you want to be completely insane, which I always do, there could be one of these motors could be weak, and it could just happen to be on the ESC channel that's a little bit strong. Boy, do I fucking doubt that, but could totally be. And so if you want to really test that, take 2 of these motors and swap them with the other 2. Take all 4 motors and just rotate them and redo that test. At that point, yeah, maybe both the right side motors are weak and both the right side ESC channels are strong. You know what I'm saying? But like, no. So if you really want to like make sure that everything is totally healthy, that's what you would need to do. But that's good enough for me. And so now what we're going to do, first thing I'm going to do is pull these propellers off. These are the HQ ultralight props that I don't like. They just happen to be the last set of props that were on here. And if you don't have to change props, don't change props, because no matter what, you're putting stress on that motor shaft to motor bell laser weld. This tool that I'm using here is sold on weBLEED. It's called the Grappler. What I love about the Grappler is that these guys loop around the blades of the propellers, and then the pin pushes down on the motor shaft. And so the Grappler is the only tool that puts no stress whatsoever on the motor shaft to bell laser weld. It's a little bit kind of gangly to use, but you do get used to it. And it does become quick and easy to use. The biggest tip that I've got for you is every once in a while, push these in. You want like the memory that these little wires to be all the way in, so that they're all the way in by the hub. If you don't do that, these little wires will go out, and then they'll catch like the middle of the blade, and then they'll bend the blade up, and then they'll leave a mark in the blade, and it's just super annoying. Sometimes they'll pop off the blade. And so that's the trick with the Grappler, is every once in a while push these in so that they naturally want to go all the way in and hook the propeller blade in by the hub. That makes it so much easier to use. And then, yeah, you just kind of hold it out. You get it around one blade, out, get it around another blade. I put my thumb and my index finger in here so I can kind of help pull those little wiry bastards into the middle. Get all 3 of them on. And then you can see they kind of see how they want to hook in by the hub, and then get the pin and pop it right off. Super, super, super nice. When you buy the Grappler, it comes with, by the way, I have a weBLEED affiliate link. Hook a brother up and click it before you order. There are 2 different of these heads that come with the grappler. One of them has 3 like this, one of them has 4. The 4 one you can use for biblades or quad blades. This one's obviously for tri-blades. So yeah, let's get these propellers off, and then I'm going to swap out 3 of these motors, and then we're going to take a look at, we're going to spin the motors up with no propeller to get a little bit of a KV measurement that we can compare between all 4 of these motors, and we can also compare it to, I've tested like over 20 other motors in this exact same way. And then we will put propellers on these motors and spin each motor up to see which which motor will push the propeller up to the highest RPM. That's how we can tell which one of these 4 motors will make the most amount of power when it's loaded down. KV is a great number to know, but the real thing that we want to know is how much RPM the motor can make with the propeller on. We're going to do that test with me holding the quad as if it's a thrust stand. I personally don't fly FPV by holding the quad. I let it go and I let it fly through the air. And when this thing is flying through the air, as soon as I hit the throttle, it starts to move forward, and now it's got incoming air, which makes the motor and prop combo's job easier. And so thrust stand data is worst possible case scenario. With like 5-inch stuff, they make so much power that it's not that big of a deal. With small stuff, where we are like min-maxing every little thing to get every drip of power that we can get out of these, it does make a difference. And so on the thrust stand, which is not a real scenario, a motor that's a little bit too small and or has a little bit too high of a KV number will perform significantly worse than in the real world when it's actually flying through the air, getting some incoming air to let it spin up higher. And so these tests that I'm going to do they have some value, but the best way to do this testing is to get a full set of each one of these motors, put it on here, go out in front of the street, hammer full throttle, and let it hurtle up into the sky to get that incoming air. A motor that's a little bit too high of a KV will do okay in that scenario, and it'll kind of fall apart here on the test bench. But we're going to use this first round of testing to figure out if it makes sense to then do that. I've done that with this stock setup. I have a bunch of flight footage of me running this thing. I think we saw 44,000 RPM. I did it a couple times yesterday, so let's see. Oh, this isn't this is the DVR. I need the goggle footage, which is here. You know, I actually meant to copy this goggle footage over, so this is kind of good. So this is yesterday, so we have 65 yesterday. Okay, and then so 65 to 54. This is all the day 2 testing. So let's just grab like this one, for example, and let's see. Oh, that's a worthless file. What about this one? Is this a good file? Yeah, all right, so let's see. Where's the first disarm? No crashes yet, no disarms yet. 43,608, and then I think on day 1, I put it up in the air on the big battery to get an RPM. That's all the onboard DVR. I would have to do the same thing. I can do it real quick. Hold on. July 31st. It's probably this one. No, maybe it's this one. It was like the last battery that I flew. There's 37,000. That's a little bit low. That looks like that's after a crash. No, that ain't it. I'm pretty sure it was 44,000. Ooh, I think this is it. Nope, that's not it. which means that it should be this one. I remember I did a big full throttle punch. Yep, there it is. And then I came down and I landed in front of the door to check the RPM. So this isn't the exact one, but we're still going to get a good number here. There it is, 43. There's 2 files in a row that have 43,000. So in the air, in a real scenario, at full throttle, we're seeing 43,000. If one of these other 4 motors performs really well today, I will probably swap them on, and then we can get at least one head-to-head in actual conditions. But the testing we're gonna do today, it's gonna be good. It's gonna really clue us in to whether or not these new BetaFPV 1102 21000s are just magic. And like, when I say magic, what I really mean is BetaFPV made the magnets thicker, or they used a better magnet. Everybody says that they use N52 magnets. Most motor companies don't, because N52 magnets are expensive. But they are available, and maybe BetaFPV is now using N52 magnets, which is why this thing flies so good. This thing makes crazy power. So there's something going on. Magic can also be the air gap, the gap between the stator and the magnet. How tight that is how much power the motor will make. Unfortunately, when you tighten that up, if the bell gets bent a little bit, the motor binds up. And so, you know, with all of these, there's not like one right way of making a motor. There's a million different decisions that you make when you're designing a motor, and it'll typically be like power versus efficiency, or durability versus power, or yeah, there's a bunch of different sort of decisions that you make along the way when you're producing a motor. And yeah, that makes different motors do different things better and or worse. So we know that the AIO and these motors are all healthy. Let's take 3 of these motors off and replace them with these other motors that we're interested in, that I have pulled from 3 other builds. I had to cannibalize 3 builds in order to be able to do this testing here. So yet again, here is an example of motor plugs being amazing. Imagine doing this testing with direct soldered motors. What an absolute shit show that would be, you know? This gives me a chance to not even get caught up, get started on chat. C-Joe says, guess who bought another car? I'm going to guess that it's you. What'd you get? Yuke says, Tiny Whoop Love, gonna make whole. Double Jose says, I was really surprised how well that thing flew. Not bad for 1S. Incredible for 1S. Dannon says, when I initially connect, I just see flickering color image, and after switching the system back and forth, it starts to work. Dude, that's so weird. Chef Bruno says, I have a Boxer Crush. Well, let me get this other one unplugged. I have a Boxer Crush. I keep getting RF critical on 2 whoops. And then I have RSSI DBM in my OSD on 2 3.5-inch rigs. But on all, I have LQ 700. Any help? RSSI DBM is a warning that most people say just to turn off. Which most people smarter than me say to just turn it off. Bardwell's the first person I heard talk about it, but he's not the only one. RSSI DBM is mainly used for being able to tell if you have a bad antenna. Your link quality, that's what matters. And so, do they put red dots on their motor plugs? I don't think so. And so, yeah, if your link quality is 7/100, and then RSNR is the other really nice thing to have in there in your OSD. If your RSNR is fine and your link quality is fine, you're going to be all right. And so, yeah, maybe just turn that RSSI DBM warning off and just keep an eye on the link quality. It's a little bit weird that the Tiny Whoops are doing it, but your other rigs are not. But Tiny Whoops typically have horrible antennas and horrible antenna placement, which could absolutely explain what's going on, and probably does explain what's going on there. So yeah, I think that's what you got going on. Why did I leave motor 3 on? That was a weird choice. I thought that I was leaving motor 1 connected. Whatever. All right, first one I'm putting on here is the RC Power 1003, which I can almost guarantee you is going to be too much. This RC Power 1003, I've tried this before on 1S. You have to run gigantic 1S batteries, like 650, 680, 750, 850, in order for this motor to not just hammer the battery to death. And so, yeah, this is probably not a good choice, but we're going to try it anyway. This motor has a base. Oh, fuck. Never mind. We're not going to test this motor because they use a motor base where you can 3-screw mount it or 4-screw mount it. And on these new BetaFPV frames, they put a little bit of extra material, which makes it so that this just doesn't work. Although I really do want to test this motor. I think I can bodge this if I run longer hardware here. This is not going to be perfect, but I think we can kind of make this work. Hang on a second. Let me just see if I have slightly longer. I do. This hardware will work. 1, 2, and 3. Okay. This motor might make like some rattling noises on here. That's fine. We're just looking for that maximum RPM. We should be okay. I actually need these again because this is going to be a little challenging to get these, to just get this motor mounted. I forgot all about this. Yeah, on the BetaFPV frame, instead of just having a flat motor mounting pad, they've added a little bit of plastic on top to help you seat a normal motor in there. A normal motor meaning a motor with just the 3-bolt mounting. These RC Power 1003s have the double mounting setup where it's got the 3 tiny little screws or the 2 M2 screws, and so that makes this a real son of a bitch. But I think I can get around it with these longer screws. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Is that it? Is that on there? Come on, you bastard. Come on, you bastard. Oh, this is rough, bro. Oh, there it goes. I think. Is that it? Am I going to be able to catch some threads here? Come on. I think that was it. Oh, yeah, we did it. Oh, yeah. All right. Now I just got to make sure I don't put these screws too far through into the windings. So just give me one more second. You would not want to fly this like this. You could make this work, though. You could just take a little Dremel and just Dremel off the extra plastic. That would be absolutely fine. But I'm not going to do that unless I absolutely have to. Sweet. All right, that motor is mounted on there. Like I said, I would not want to fly it like that, but for this test, that's going to be completely fine. Let me get these screws out of here because when I crank this thing up, it's going to blow all kinds of thrust all over the place. Okay, so there's one motor. Now I just got 2 more to throw in here real quick. Chef Bruno also says, only thing I've changed is I put the ELRS finder back on it. It started with my Nano Scout doing the RF critical, and then the other started the RSSI and the OSD. No OSD alert on whoops. Yeah, that's an interesting problem. I can't imagine the finder, the ELRS finder, has anything to do with it. But to be honest, I don't know anything else. I don't know anything about the ELRS finder, so I guess maybe it could be that. I'm just, yeah, I I didn't even know that was a thing, to be honest. Maybe I did, but I haven't learned anything about it, unfortunately. I'm assuming it's just a signal strength. Usually with the finders, and they put them into analog goggles as well. It's just a very high hertz, very high refresh rate signal strength meter. And so you turn around, and when the signal strength is the strongest, you walk that way. And then you turn again when it's the strongest, you walk that way. Dannon says, so I was flying Firefly 24S 04 wide today, a lot of prop wash in it, so I'm considering swapping it into the Firefly 25 frame. Without swapping the motors, the problem is going to get even worse. If you take the same set of motors, so prop wash is killed by response time. The quad goes off in one direction. As quick as possible, the motor in the weak side spins up to push against that. Going to a bigger, heavier propeller is going to make that response time slower. And prop wash is then going to get worse. So without a motor change, you're going to make the situation worse. You will get more efficiency. Going to a bigger propeller will absolutely get you more efficiency, but it will get you worse flight characteristics. So if the prop wash is what you're trying to get rid of, yeah, you're going to make the situation worse. If you go with a significantly bigger motor, you could potentially make the situation better, but it depends. You're going to have to match the motor with the propeller, with the all-up weight, in order to get a rig that flies really well. I'm actually really surprised that you're having prop wash issues with that Firefly 24S, because that is a super overpowered rig. And when rigs are super overpowered, they have really good response time. So my guess is going to be that the tune is off. You either have too much filtering or you don't have enough PID gains added in. So grab that master multiplier and start moving it up on that build before you do anything else, and see how high you can move that master multiplier before the motors start getting hot or the thing starts oscillating and trying to fly away on its own. And maybe you don't have to spend any money to fix that problem. If you want to dive deeper into it, we certainly can. You can spend some money on us working together rather than just buying a bunch of parts and with your eyes closed and throwing them at it to see if that maybe works. Over on, you can either just message me and we'll set it up. But if you want the protection that Fiverr offers, i.e., like if I don't do a good job, you can tell them that and they'll, I guess, make me refund you or something. I've never had it happen before, but yeah, either or. Plugging these motors back in because they're now all bolted down. Where was I? Dead Natter says, what's up, Gangly Gang? Squiddy says, hey, Ciotti, what do you think of a 3S 1104 7500 kV 2-inch 04 quad? Not enough to go off of. One of the things that I do through Fiverr with one-on-one sessions with people is called build planning. The build planning session that we run is either a half an hour or an hour. And for the first like 15 to 20 minutes, I ask you question after question after question. I need the answers to all of those questions to be able to recommend anything. Otherwise, I'm just going to tell you what I like, and you're a different person than me. And I've been flying for 10 years. And so what I like is probably going to be pretty different than what you like. And so if I were just to answer your question now, you would build this quad and roll a 20-sided die. And maybe you roll the same number as me because you're very similar to me and you've also been flying for 10 years. but probably not. And then you end up with something that I would love, but you don't love. And so, yeah, these live streams, it's totally impossible to answer open-ended questions like that. But the best that I can possibly do for you is tell you that the 7500 kV is a good kV for 3S and 2-inch tri-blades. And I can also tell you that 1104 is a motor that is going to make good power for that setup, but it's a motor that's going to be super fragile. Less than 12 millimeter wide stators all use a 1.5 millimeter motor shaft below the bell, and that's really easy to bend. If you can get up to a 1202 or a 1202, any of the 12 series motors, they're going to be almost twice as durable. And so don't get an 1104. Get a 1202.5 or a 1203 or a 1204 or a 1303 because they've got a significantly thicker motor shaft down below the bell, which absolutely matters. I can bend a motor shaft on an 1103 or an 1104 in one crash. And that's like, you know, that's absurd. That's like a $12 crash. That's ridiculous. So yeah, don't run 1104s. Get to 12 series motors as often as you can. If you can ever put a 1202, a 1202 and a half, a 1203, a 1204 motor on a quad instead of an 11 or a 10, always do it. Always, always, always. Uriel says, and I get it. B. Kirk says, can you just buy the canopy and use it on the old Meteor75 Pro? Absolutely not. This new canopy is very specific because of the rubber grommets. The rubber grommets have very specific slots. This canopy will only ever work on the Meteor75 Pro and 65 Pro V2 canopies. Uriel says the frame opening is like a spring. If you glue it with a bit of hot glue, lighter trick. You can certainly also do that. Phil Bradley says, CiottiFPV or anybody, have you flown any of the sub 250 Oasis range? There's very few options for bind and fly drones in the UK at the moment, but those are available. I haven't personally flown them, but I've heard that they're pretty okay. Just be careful of the motor and KV selection. Make sure that they don't have a motor, whatever bind and fly you're looking at, make sure that the motor isn't too small or the KV isn't too low, and you'll be fine. That's the most common screw up with bind and flies, is that they use motors, they try to boost the runtime by using motors that are too small and too low of a KV. And so for somebody it's their first drone, it's great because they get more runtime and they get less power and more throttle resolution, and that makes it easier to fly. For people that have flown before, it sucks because you don't get shit in the way of power. B. Kirk says, I saw a UFO in your flight footage. It was unidentified floating arrow on your screen. I had to go back and zoom to identify it. Levster says, hi. Uriel says, the neighbors must love you for the amusement. The drone is going around. You know, I fly all this stuff that's small and light. Most of the neighbors don't even know that it's going down, which is perfect. That's how you not get the cops called on you. If they don't know that you're flying, that's a good thing. Okay, so we've got 4 different motors on here now. Let's check the KV first. Okay, and come on. All right, cool. So where did Betaflight go? Here is Betaflight. We are going to plug back in here and connect, and there's that. And we're going to do a little bit of myth busting in terms of KV. We're not going to care too much trying to figure out what the actual KV number is. What we're going to do is we're going to take 4 different motors. We're going to look at the actual RPM that they each do. And then if the 22,000 kV motor is turning a higher RPM than 3 21,000 kV motors, great. But that's not what we're going to see. We're going to see all kinds of weird shit. Ready? This is what happens every time. It's like this is where you get to see how all over the place the KV numbers that they stamp on these motor bells actually are. So we've got 4 volts going to the quad, just like all the previous testing that I've done. I'm going to go on to one of my spreadsheets here, and I'm going to add 4 more columns. We're going to go, I'm going to skip a line here, BetaFPV 1102 21K, and then we're going to go BetaFPV 1102 22K, and then we're going to go GEP-RC 1002 25K, and then we're going to go RC in power 1103, no, it's 1003. 1003, I think they're 22,000, right? I just said it. Might be 21. No, they're 22. Yeah. All right. So we got all 4 of these. Oh, excuse me. We got all 4 of these. The other thing that I need to do that's a little weird in this testing is that I can only test these at 50% throttle. If I fire these up to 100% throttle, the 8-bit ESCs can't spin them fast enough, and they all max out at 85,000 RPM. And so that's why we're doing this testing at 50% throttle. All of the testing that I've done has been at 50% throttle. The actual way to check KV is to feed the motor a specific amount of voltage. It's about the voltage, not about percentage, not about any of this other shit. And so, again, my testing is not, we're not looking for the actual KV number. We're just looking to make some generalizations here. Kevin Sumner did set up this Tiny Whoop data spreadsheet, though, to artificially calculate the KV. So we will get a number, but don't worry too much about that number. All right, let's zoom in so that you can all see this. We are powered up. I'm going to click this. And so now motor 1 is the RC in power 1003. Let's see what we get at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's just the page up button that I'm doing there. So we've got 40,000, and it's juddering between 3 and 6. So we're going to go in the middle, 40,500. 40,500. Fucker. Forgot about this. 40,500. 40,500. Okay? And then we are going to do the old school BetaFPV 1102 22,000, which is motor 2. Come on. All right, that's still on. Motor 2. Click it and then page up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Page up for power. And it's going back and forth between 39 and 40,000. Nope, now it's solidified at 40,000. It's bouncing back and forth between 40,001 and 40,003. So we're going to go 40,002. 40,200. Oh, hold on. I put this in the wrong spot. RC and power. So far, these are actually looking pretty good. Motor 3 is the new 1102 21,000. This is what we've all been waiting for. Here we go. Click it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 21,000. My fat ass. This is up at 45,000 kV. Yeah, so it's not 21,000 kV. It's they wound it to be a higher kV. Let's give it another second, see if it settles. It's bouncing back and forth between 44,600 and 45,000. So we're going to call this 44,800. That's certainly one way to make more power. 44,800, I said, right? I hope so. Last but not least is the GEP-RC 1002 25,000. This is where we'll see a nice big number, usually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 50. All the way up to 50. bouncing back and forth between 50,000 and 50,500. So we're going to call that 50,200. 50,200. So, I rest my case, friends. The KV numbers stamped on these motors mean absolute dick. Do they give you somewhat of an indication of what kind of RPM to expect? Of course. But boy, are they all over the place. You just got to see live from the same manufacturer, right? BetaFPV, a 1002 22,000 kV motor turning 40,200 RPM, and then an 1102 21,000 kV motor turning 44,800 kV RPM. So yeah, even within the menu, and like, I don't know, I don't understand why within the manufacturer they would do that. I don't know what would benefit. Maybe they just didn't test it, but like, I don't know what benefit there would be on BetaFPV's side with this new motor, calling it a 21,000 instead of a 23,000. Myself included, I was not very interested in this new motor when I saw that it was 21,000 because the 22,000 kV already didn't have enough RPM. And so that's really weird. I don't get that at all. I do get one manufacturer thinking that like, hey, we're going to use this method of measuring KV, and if it turns a number that's too high, so be it. Like, I can kind of understand that, but within the same manufacturer, it doesn't make sense, and it's pretty frustrating, to be honest. But ain't a damn thing I can do about it. Buy yourself a Land Here shirt, and you'll feel better about it. So now we're going to put propellers on these and get a loaded number at 100. Now we can go up to 100% throttle, because we're going to have some resistance on the motor. It's not going to be able to spin up to 85,000 RPM, and we'll be good to go. And so, here you go. Here's how you don't destroy motors, friends. I'm also going to have to get these, I'm going to have to go into the motor, get them spinning in the right direction. But here's how you don't ruin your motors when you're putting propellers on. 2 fingers. You can use your middle finger, but it's just 2 fingers. And you push down on the motor. I'm using double already. You push down on the propeller. If you can't get that propeller all the way down against the bell, stop and pull the propeller off. Don't go ape shit trying to put this propeller down. In this case, I can't quite get it down there. I'm having to push really, really hard on it. And that's how you wreck a propeller. That's how you wreck a motor. So let's pull this off. We're going to hit it with the drill bit one time because it almost made it all the way on. Not quite. So we know that it's close. We know that we don't have to drill a lot out. And now we won't hurt this motor. You can get away with pushing a propeller on too hard once or twice and then removing it really hard once or twice. But like, sometimes you wreck it right away. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes you do that, and then, you know what? I'm actually not going to drill these propellers out. This is my last set of these propellers, and the inner diameter of these props is perfect for these BetaFPV motors, these new BetaFPV 1102 21,000s. And so I don't want to remove any material here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to run these. What propellers have I run in the past? I have like, is it the 1610? Yeah, I've used the 1610 in the past. So that's actually what I'm going to do. I'm going to use 1610 propellers because I have a massive spreadsheet where I used those as my bigger props. And it would be nice to be able to include these 4 motors test results in that. And again, this number that we're about to pull doesn't mean anything. Once we have a propeller on here, it doesn't mean jack shit. It has nothing to do with KV. It has nothing to do with anything. It makes more sense to keep this a little bit standardized than to, than anything else. And also, this is a thrust. This is basically a thrust stand test that we're doing here, and that really makes it kind of worthless data. Why are every single one of these that I'm pulling out counterclockwise? There we go. There's a clockwise. Give me one more. Come on. Is that one? Hey. All right. So we're gonna use some 1610s, and these 1610s fit on almost all motors. Sometimes they're a little bit too loose. That one's a little too loose. It's probably gonna fly off, but we're just gonna chance it because we're in the basement, and that's fine if it flies off. Yeah, all of these 1610s are fitting a little on the loose side. So like, for example, right, I just put one of these 1610s onto the GEP-RC 1002, and it almost fell on there. I then put one onto the RC and Power 1003, and it had a little bit more resistance, but it was still very loose. I just put it onto the new BetaFPV 1102, and it was really tight. I'm now putting it onto the old school BetaFPV 1102 22,000, and I can't even get it on there. I have to drill this one out. And so every single different motor company has a slightly different thickness motor shaft. And so you have to drill these props out. And you're going to learn. Like, when you start drilling these props out, you're going to learn. Like, this rig with this set of motors, the motors have big fat motor shafts. I have to drill those propellers out 2 times. You know, I just did it once. Now I'm doing it a second time. Pull it off. When you pull it off, it removes a little dust cloud comes out. That's a little bit of material coming off of there. And so on certain motors, you're going to have to run it up and down the drill bit 4 times, certain motor prop combos. And then the propellers have different inner diameters as well. And so you'll learn the propellers and you'll learn the motors. There we go. We got 1610s on there. Real quick, I need to get this plugged into Betaflight and get the motors turning the correct direction, because if you spin a propeller backwards, it has a completely different amount of wind resistance than if you spin it the correct direction. So that is obviously really important. So let's do that first here. Come on. Not all motors spin the same direction. So motors, and let's just for the sake of argument, let's just spin them all up real quick and see what direction they're spinning. Motor 2 is good. Motor 1 is wrong. Motor 3 is correct. Motor 4 is correct, so it's actually just motor 1 that I need to reverse. But unfortunately, when you click motor direction, you go in here, it resets all 4 motors, so I have to redo them all. Motor 1 is now correct. Motor 2 is now incorrect. Motor 3 is now incorrect. Let me guess, 4 is going to be incorrect as well. Sure enough. Cool, so there we go, and now we just double check. Motor 1 is correct, 2 is correct, 3 is correct, 4 is correct. They're all spinning props in, which is good. One last test to make sure that they're all making thrust downwards. And they are. I can also just look at the motors to be able to tell that. Look at the propellers, rather. And I am going to do that as well. Props in, props in, props in, props in. Cool. All right. So motors are spinning in the right direction. Props are in. We're going to do this test at 100% of each motor. And we're going to see what we get. I need somewhere to write this down. So let me go back to this spreadsheet here. And the first motor is going to be the RC and Power. And all right, hopefully that's big enough for you guys to see. RC and Power is motor number 1. This one should do the best because it's a big ass 1003. Let's see. Here we go. 52,600. 52,600. I got to do these a little bit shorter because the FETs and motors are going to get real hot being fully loaded. Motor number 2 is the BetaFPV 1102. Oh, fucker. 22,000. Here we go. Bouncing between 52 and 53. 52,500, we'll call it. Almost identical to the RC Power 1003. That's crazy. Motor 3 is the new BetaFPV 1102 21,000 in air quotes. Jesus. Between 55 and 56,000. Good God. So call it 55,500. Last but not least, the Gep RC 1002 25,000. And then we're going to talk about what this all means. Between 55 and 56. 55,500. Absolutely identical with the new BetaFPV. All right, so what's all that mean? Let's take a look. Let's take a look at these numbers, and we'll talk about motor power versus KV. The size of the motor, how big the motor is, has a lot to do with how much power it will make. That has the most to do with how much power it will make. Think like a big old Ford 5-liter 302 versus a little Honda Civic K24 4-cylinder. The big motor has the potential to make a shitload of power. But the little motor, if you spin it high enough, if you crank the RPM, and this is what Honda does, you can take a K20. So let's talk about like old school Ford 5-liter 302 pushrod engines. We're talking like from when we were all growing up, 80s, 90s, the old school pushrod 302. That's a motor that spins to like 6,000 RPM. I think the red line is maybe 6 or 6,500 RPM. And that engine will make 250 horsepower on a good day. 6,000 RPM, lots of like grunt. We don't talk about grunt with electric motors. They don't work the same way as electric gasoline engines. Gasoline engines, not electric. Honda K24 with some hot cams will make 250 horsepower while spinning 9,000 RPM. And so Honda is pulling more air into a motor that's half the size, right? 2.4 liters versus 5 liters. Half as much displacement, but twice as much RPM. And so with twice as much RPM, it can pull the same volume of air, compress it, blow it up, send it out, and make the same amount of power as that old school Ford 302. If you put hot cams, a good intake, if you fix all the old bullshit problems with that 302 5-liter, you can make 300-400 horsepower with it. But typically you're going to you're going to run it higher. You're going to run it 7,000-8,000 RPM to do that a lot of times. You don't necessarily have to, but, and so there is some truth to there's no replacement for displacement, especially in gasoline engines, because of the way that they produce torque. Electric motors don't produce torque in the same way. At low RPMs, being able to pull a volume of air down, which is done more easily with a bigger displacement engine, makes more torque. A little tiny 4-cylinder, 2.4 liter, even though that's a pretty big 4-cylinder, all of the intake runner design being perfect can't make up for the fact that that motor has a small volume of air in there, and at low RPMs it's just hard to move air into it to make that torque. electric motors don't have that limitation, which is why we never talk about torque with them. We talk about thrust. And so throw that shit out of your head of like there being a torque advantage or a torque disadvantage with electric motors. It just doesn't work that way. But a physically bigger electric motor has the potential to make more power. The end. If the KV is too low, though, you have to run like a really aggressive propeller to get any thrust out of that low RPM. So KV becomes super important in this discussion with electric motors. And so right now we're in a situation, we're getting to see this perfectly. RC in power, 1003, which is way bigger. Watch this. 1003 is so much bigger than 1102 or 1002. Watch this. So there's this great little stator volume calculator at this link. Freeze it if you want to check it out. This thing is awesome. This should be a bookmark. All you do in here is you type in the stator size and it'll tell you the volume. And so here are the different stator sizes that we're working with today. And so we've got 1002, the surface area. The surface area is how cool the motor will stay. The bigger the number, the cooler the motor will stay. The volume is how much power potential the motor has. 1002 is 157 millimeters cubed. 1102 is 190. That's a pretty big jump. But then 1003 is all the way up to 236. So the 1003 motor, reason why is that 10 width, 3 height, the height does more work than the width. So adding a millimeter of width doesn't add as much of an advantage as adding a millimeter of height. And so the biggest power potential motor that we have, the RC in Power 1003, with no load on it, turned 40,500 RPM, which is almost the lowest. The old school BetaFPV did 40,200. That's so close that they're basically the same thing. But when you put a propeller on it, the RC in Power 1003 actually pulled the same number. I didn't realize that. It pulled the same number as the BetaFPV 1102 22,000, which, what that basically means is that the 1003 motor with this propeller, it's not a good combination. If you can take a 1003 with 236 volume and then an 1102 with 190 volume, and they make the same power, they make the same number here, that means that they are kind of sort of maxing out that KV that they possibly can. What it really means is that the bigger motor is under-propped. If I put a 3-blade prop on here or a 2-inch prop that's going to drag these motors down harder, the bigger motor would start to outperform the smaller motor. And do we also see that with the other two motors? Oh no, this is so cool. Okay, this is perfect. This is a perfect setup. So those two motors are fine, not great. The 1003 is a much bigger motor. It's much heavier. No reason to run it. The old school BetaFPV 1102 22,000 outperforms this 1003 on setups with roughly this amount of drag on the propeller. Again, if we went to a more draggy propeller, bigger or more blades or higher pitch, the 1003 would start to outperform it. But these 1003s are rough. These things hit the battery really hard because they are a big motor. And on 1S, I can't really recommend these RC in Power 1003s. The BetaFPV old school 1102 22,000 all day of the week versus over this 1003. But these other two motors are where things get really interesting. GEP-RC 1002 25,000 kV versus BetaFPV 1102 21,000 kV. 21,000 kV, no prop on it, turned 44,800 RPM. Hold on. I got you, fam. Oh, come on. Put the screenshot up. Computer, you can do this. There you go. Okay. Results to be expected. 21,000 kV turned 44,800. 25,000 kV turned 50,000. Makes total sense. What doesn't make sense is a 21,000 kV motor versus a 22,000 kV motor. The 21,000 kV motor makes 44.8. The 22,000 kV motor makes 42. This right here, this is how we know that the new BetaFPV 1102 21,000 kV motors are not actually 21,000 kV. They're like 23, maybe 24,000 kV. Remember that GEP-RC is going to measure kV differently than BetaFPV. We can't say, we could maybe say that this BetaFPV 1102-21 is actually 25 and that GEP-RC, their kV measurement is weird. We don't know. We don't know how each one of these manufacturers are measuring kV. But what's super interesting and really, really cool here is this is a perfect example of a lower kV motor making more RPM without a propeller on it. That is just BetaFPV getting the kV numbers on these motors, stamping the wrong numbers on. As far as I'm concerned, there's no reason this should happen within that manufacturer. But that's fine. What we're actually comparing here are the motors that made a lot more power. The motors that made 55,000 RPM with a propeller on there versus 52,000. Because these are the two motors that we want. These two motors make way more power. But check this shit out. 1102, a bigger stator motor. Even though with no propeller on it, it only turned 44,800. It with a propeller on it at 50% throttle. Again, these numbers are all lower because this is at 50% throttle. These numbers on the right are higher because they're at 100% throttle. At 50% throttle, this 1102-21 turned 44, but then loaded up, it turned 55,500. And then the GEP-RC 1002 unloaded made made over 5,000 more RPM, but then with the prop on it, turned the exact same number because of the stator size. You are looking at the difference between a 1002 stator and an 1102 stator. That is really, really cool. That's exactly what should happen. It's exactly what we talk about all the time. It's also pretty cool that the old BetaFPV 1102 22,000s, which have always been outperformed by the GEP-RC 1002 25,000. Here's why. This is why those motors perform like that. The GEP-RC motors, even though they're at a smaller, even though the GEP-RC is a smaller motor, the KV is much higher. Look at the KV difference. 50,000 versus 40,000. And so another beautiful example of you can take a smaller, lighter weight motor and wind the KV a little bit higher, and that will allow it to make more power, even though it's lighter and smaller. As long as you don't go too crazy. You can't just keep going with that. Like, GEP-RC might be able to do like a 27,000 kV motor, but if they got up to like 30 and 32 and 35, that's going too far. And you're going to start to get a lot of inefficiency there. And you'll start to actually lose power, believe it or not. But man, what a cool set of data here that so perfectly shows how the KV numbers that these motors are advertised with don't mean shit. They're a good starting point, but boy, are they wrong a lot. The size of the motor matters a lot, but it's not the whole story. And the effect that KV can have. And also, this absolutely shows us why these new BetaFPV 1102s fly so well, because they are wound to a much higher KV than the old 1102 22,000s, which were great. The old 1102 22s are awesome. They're an awesome motor. They're not quite as good as the GEP-RC 1002, which is really cool that we just saw why. And then this new BetaFPV is really, really good. Let me do one more test. I know we're at 5 o'clock, but I want to do one more test. I want to put a propeller on here that's more draggy and show you the difference, because I think that is going to highlight the downfall of the GEP-RC. I think that's going to show us where the GEP-RC motor starts to fall apart, because it's got the smaller stator but the higher KV, and there's going to be a point where that smaller stator runs out of cooling ability and just runs out of raw power. It's like trying to lug that little Honda K24 motor up a really steep hill. The big old V8 is going to just use that torque advantage and go charging up that hill no problem. The smaller, less displacement motor is going to have a really tough time. Holy shit. Oh, wow. I pushed this one propeller on here way too hard. I knew I was pushing it too hard when I was doing it, but I didn't think it would be this bad. Hold on. Oh. Yikes. Jesus. So I just hurt one of these motors a little bit. In fairness, it wasn't too bad. I was doing it in the safest way that I possibly could, but when you have to put that much force to get one of these props on or off, you have done a little something to that motor. Unfortunately, that's one of the new motors too. I'm using the Propeller for these bi-blade propellers. It's my favorite way to quickly remove these bi-blades, because if you grab the motor base down here, I kind of grab in between the motor base and the motor bell, it pulls the prop off just fine. It pulls the prop off without really stressing out that laser weld between the two, because you're pulling on the motor shaft, and the motor shaft has a C-clip on the bottom, so the C-clip will pull up into the stator, and you're never going to break that C-clip. So you're not, the Propeller, as long as you're not holding onto the motor bell. If you're holding onto the motor bell and you're pushing up and you're pulling up on the propeller, that is pulling up on the connection point between the motor shaft and the motor bell. I'm gonna have to fucking crank this one too. Which is why you want to grab the motor base. It's hard to grab the base of the motor because it's skinnier than the motor bell. Jesus. All right, so let's put, I'm going to put these 1.8, yeah, because I just drilled these out. I'm going to put these, where's the fourth one? Here's the fourth one. HQ 1.8 by 0.9 by 3. So we're adding an entire extra blade, and the pitch number is calculated per blade. Yes, these motors are just dropping, or these props are just dropping right on. Hey, beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, this is going to be cool. We should see the RC and Power 1003 motor shine here. We might not, but we should. I'll be very interested to see. I am very interested to see what happens here. Ah, shit. Did I put these on right? Props in, props in, props in, props in. Look at me go. And now we should see the GEP-RC motor start to fall apart. The GEP-RC 1002 25,000 is perfect for 1.6 inch bi-blades, low pitch 1.6 inch tri-blades, and then 1.8 inch bi-blades as well. But on these 1.8 inch tri-blades, the smaller 1002 stator should suffer. And this is where this whole motor prop selection thing becomes a little bit of an art, is that there's this crossroads of like a lot of different things going on. You want a lot of KV, but not too much. If you have too much, it hurts efficiency. Yada, yada, yada. All right, let's get this out of here. 1610. HQ 1.8 by 0.9 by 3. Just leave myself a couple notes here. Okay, RC and power motor first. And where'd BetaFlight go? There it is. Connect. Motors tab. Zoom you guys in a little bit. Sorry, I'm way behind on chat. I will never miss super chat, so if you're desperate for me to read your chat comment, just give me your money. Sometimes I want to do, there's a bunch of testing that I really want to do, and I'll get through as much chat as I can, but here we go. RC and power 1003 22,000 first. Ow! So that propeller came off of there. I wonder where it went. Hang on. That hit my finger pretty hard. I mean, it was at 1,000,000 RPM, so I get it. That one, I was wondering if it was going to stay on. That was the loosest one. The RC and power 1003 motor shaft is definitely the thinnest of the bunch here. I sell these little 1.5 millimeter motor shaft tighteners on the Etsy store, and I'm going to use it right now to show you how well it works. You just put it on the propeller, you tighten it down. If you really want to tighten up the propeller, you run it all the way through. If you only want it tighten up a little bit, you only screw it in there a little bit. It's just an M1.7 socket-headed screw, which is really hard to find in just the right length. And so it just digs into the inside of the propeller, and when you dig into plastic, you're going to push it, and then it's going to squish on the outside, and it makes the props fit. If a prop is a little bit too loose, it makes it a little bit tighter. And so now it is the perfect tightness. I just had to put it on there with just the right amount of pressure, and so now, as you're about to see, it will not fly off. Here we go. RC and power 1003 again. Just trying to hold this thing in the same way that I did last time, which is kind of like that. There we go. All right, here we go. 45,000. What a difference. From 52 to 45. Ah, shit. I wasn't sharing my screen. Sorry, guys. Just so you don't think I'm lying. Between 44 and 45,000. So 44,500, we're going to call it. BetaFPV 1102, 22,000. Up next. 44,000. That's weird. 44,500. Man, this RC and power motor is taking a beating today. Up next is the new BetaFPV 1102 21,000. Between 44 and 45,000. Same RPM. Last but not least, the Gep RC 1002 25,000. Please don't have such a high of a number. Yeah. 42,700. Now we're talking. 42,700. Okay. I expected that result. I didn't expect the rest of those results, but let's talk through them. Let me check something real quick. I want to see how low the voltage is dropping on this power supply when I'm doing this. Matter of fact, no, I'm just going to put a battery on here, and I'm going to do this same test with a battery, but just out of curiosity. Hold on, let me just see. No, it's dropping to 3.9, but then it's recovering back up to 4 volts. But just for the sake of argument, I want to put a battery on here and run this test with a battery versus this power supply. We're now going to have an unknown amount of voltage, but let me just, you know, we don't fly connected to power supplies. We fly on batteries. And so let's see. Let's see what numbers we get. Yeah, see, I had a feeling that was the case. We need to do that. All right, hold on. Let me do that again. That's the RC and power motor. The problem is every time I do this, the battery is going to drop a little bit of voltage. 47,000. Hold on. 47,000. 47,000. Now the BetaFPV. I actually kind of love that that was repeatable right there. Let's see. 48 and 49, so 48,500. Jesus, these new BetaFPV motors are something else. And then the GEP-RC. 45. All right, cool. So the numbers are a little different, but the results are the same, which is great. And okay. So the LiPo was at 4.2 something volts. When I went full throttle, I didn't look. You guys might have been able to see the little voltage readout here. If somebody wants to rewind and look at what this voltage number was reading when I was full throttle, I'm assuming that it was reading more than 4 volts because these made bigger numbers than the power supply. What I should do is buy like a 10,000 kV 1S battery and put a BT 2.0 lead on it, and do these tests from an actual LiPo, because LiPos can push really hard. These little power supplies, they can't push the amperage, the number of amps that a LiPo can, unbelievably. But that should explain the difference. But what's cool is almost all of the numbers, high and low wise, worked out here. So RC and power 1003 22,000 kV is almost the biggest loser here with the biggest propeller, even though it's a significantly bigger stator motor, even though it turned the same RPM as the old BetaFPV 1102 22,000. It's just not making the power. It's just it's still underpropped. Even on a 1.8 inch tri-blade, we are not loading that motor down enough to take advantage of how big that stator is. That's the Ford 302. That's the big old 5-liter V8. But we're not asking it for enough to take advantage of it. Where's that screenshot? Here it is. And so the biggest loser here today is the heaviest motor, which is the RC and Power 1003, which makes sense. I've never been able to find a scenario where this motor works all that well. It is too big for 1S. 1003s are amazing on 2S, but on 1S, it's too much. GEP-RC 1002 25,000, small motor, mega kV. When you load this small motor up with a draggy propeller, it falls apart. It can't even perform as well as the 1102 at 22,000 kV, right? 42,700 versus 44,500, 40,000 versus 47,000. That is a smaller kV motor. But look here, look at this column. That 1002 25,000 is outperforming the 1102 on a 1.6 inch bi-blade. That's how you know you've found a magical motor and propeller combination. When it outperforms the other stuff that it shouldn't because it's a smaller motor, but you've got that kV advantage. The real standout here though, is this new BetaFPV 1102-21000. It is doing better than the RC and Power 1003-22,000 in every measurable way, which is crazy. And so what BetaFPV has done is they've just refined their 1102 and they've wound it to be a higher KV. It's not 21,000 kV. It's more like 24, maybe even 25,000 kV, and it's a bigger stator volume than the GEP-RC 1002-25. So when you put it onto a bigger, draggier propeller, it starts to just kill the GEP-RC. 48,500 versus 45,000. 44,500 versus 42.7. But when you go down to a bi-blade 1.6, they're exactly the same, 55,500. And so the GEP-RC 1002-25,000 is actually a better choice for that 1.6-inch bi-blade. It's the perfect motor. 1002 versus 1102, so it's smaller and it's lighter. 25,000 kV versus 21,000 kV. We're taking advantage of that extra kV. But everything else, this new... Long story short right now is that this new BetaFPV 1102-21000 is the god motor for 1S, 1.6-inch, or 1.8-inch, probably even 2-inch builds. 2-inch is too big for a 1S setup. You want to go 2S by that point. But 1.6-inch props, 1.8-inch props, BetaFPV 1102-21000. If you want to save a fraction of a gram, the GEP-RC motors are awesome on a 1.6-inch bi-blade. But anything more draggy than a 1.6-inch bi-blade, these new GEP-RC motors just run away. They just absolutely run away because they're a bigger stator and because they are wound to be probably about the same. Well, I mean, we can literally see that right here. What was the difference? No, they're not. I guess they're not wound to be. Yeah. So the GEP-RC 1002-25,000 with no propeller on it is cranking up to 50,200. So these new BetaFPVs are not wound to be as high of a KV as the GEP-RC motors, but they're a bigger stator and they're making more power. And you can see that when you put a more pitchy prop on. 44,500 RPM versus 42.7, 48.5 versus 45. Awesome. I love when I do this when I do some of this testing and the results turn out like this. These results perfectly match the size of the motors and the KVs of the motors and the motor prop combination. And this way of testing, which you can do, all of you can do this testing. I just showed you how to do it step by step by step. And you can figure out which is the perfect motor prop combo for your setup, exactly like we just did. If you don't understand fully how to do that, watch this live stream a second time. I guarantee you'll have a better idea at the end of the second watch. You might need to watch it a third time. I need to watch stuff 3 times to like when I don't understand something, I have to watch it 3 full times to really get it. And then I usually have to then like dive into it myself and try to kind of figure it out in my own way. But for the last hour and 20 minutes, I have walked you through exactly how to figure out for each build that you've got, how to pick the perfect motor and propeller. You probably already have a propeller that you want to run. You kind of should, because there are propellers that are more durable and less durable. And so that you can figure that out. How much durability do you want? Figure that out. There are bi-blades and there are tri-blades. Bi-blades are more slidey, but a little bit more efficient. Tri-blades are more grippy, a little bit less efficient. Tri-blades are worse in the wind, bi-blades are better in the wind. That's enough. You should be able to figure out if you want a bi-blade or a tri-blade from that. Low-pitch propellers are better for going slow. High-pitch propellers are better for going fast. High-pitch propellers are usually a little more durable. Low-pitch, a little bit less durable. Bang. you should be able to figure out. Those 3 things right there will tell you which propeller is best for you. Now you just need to figure out what motor is perfect for you. And the last hour and 20 minutes shows you how to do that. You've got Betaflight, you've got batteries. If you might not have a power supply, but we did that test with the battery and it was pretty damn accurate. We only saw the voltage on the battery go from like 4.26 down to 4.21, I think, at the end of the test. That's close enough. If you want to tighten that up, put the battery on your charger. When the charger says it's full, take it off, run 1, take it right off the quad, put it back on the charger till it says that it's done, take it off, run the next motor, right? You can see the voltage in the motors tab. And so wait for that voltage to be exactly the same. Ramp the motor up, look at the RPM, ramp it back down. You can do this stuff very repeatedly. And you can absolutely figure out what the perfect motor, prop, voltage, all up weight combo is for you. If you dive down that rabbit hole, write this shit down and put it up on our Discord, because it's really good data. It really helps to have the data from one person into the next person. Also, if you screw this up and you're showing that whatever, the 1102-21000 is the lowest power motor, we're going to say to you on my Discord, which is linked on CiottiFPV.com, we're going to say to you, yo, that ESC channel is probably on its way out. And then that's going to help you, because you're going to dive into that and you're going to, oh, shit, okay. And so, like, with more data comes an ability to troubleshoot this stuff together, which is, we've been doing that forever over in the Discord. But, yeah, when new, really high-performing stuff comes out, it's cool to get more than just my data points here. And if like 3 of you test this new motor and find that it's turning lower of a kV, we'll dive back into it and figure out what the hell happened in my test. Make sure that you run your AIO. Make sure you do everything that I did on this live stream. Run the AIO with 4 matched motors, 4 matched propellers, to make sure that the AIO channels are all strong. Hey, this is also a way to test propellers. This is a great way of testing propellers, because the propeller pitches don't match, just like the motor KVs don't match. So you can do all of this same testing, 4 of the same motors, but 4 different propellers. And you hold the thing and you see which propellers crank up to the highest RPM. The highest RPM means the lowest pitch. Not necessarily. If they're all tri-blades, the highest RPM means the lowest pitch. If it's tri-blades versus bi-blades, that goes out the window because pitch is per blade. But yeah, if you're trying to let a motor wind up to its full RPM, you might like the bi-blade. You know, take that and run with it. Cool. I am dying of thirst right now. Hey, I am on Shelby and the crew's live stream tonight at, I think, 7:30. Let me double check. Can somebody drop a link to that in chat if you don't mind? Where's my calendar? Yeah, 7:30. So come on over and hang out. Their live stream is insanity. It is the best produced FPV live stream ever, and it is an absolute party. The guys are insane, and this will be my second time going on there. God only knows what shenanigans we'll get up to. Shankin says, do you twist motor wires on 65mm ultimate tiny whoop builds? I twist motor wires on everything. It bundles them closer together, which makes a difference because you got thrust blowing past them. So always twist your motor wires together. 1102 21,000 kV motors from BetaFPV. The new meta. There aren't many scenarios where you're going to want to run any different of a motor. The GEP-RC, let's see, 1002-25 on a low load propeller, like a 1.6-inch bi-blade, is going to make just as much power. Maybe more power in flight, because me holding this is not flight. Once this thing starts moving and more air is coming in, the GEP-RC motor is a higher KV, and it is going to perform better on 1.6-inch biblades. Anything more draggy than a 1.6-inch biblade, though, the BetaFPV motor is probably going to sort of come alive. I really want to measure the weight on these because the BetaFPV 1102s are very lightweight. Even though they're a bigger stator, they've somehow always been lighter weight than like they should be. And I would love to see that real quick. So hang on one second. Get the grappler going here. Come on. There we go. Oh wait, no. I have a weights tab on my spreadsheet that's available to all you guys. There's the HappyModel 1002. Tell me, let me guess. I don't have these motors on here. Of course not. Oh well. I do also kind of want to weigh. No, fuck it. I'm just gonna weigh these two. It's Jesus. It's 5:30 already. Hold on. Just gonna yank the GEP-RC motor and weigh it against the BetaFPV 1102. One of the other ways to get more power out of a motor is to wind the stator in a way that there's basically more copper in there, and that makes a motor heavier. The old BetaFPV 1102 motors used to weigh pretty much identical to what these GEP-RC motors did, but they make less power than it. So I'm curious about these new 1102s. They might be a little bit heavier. I am going to pull the old 1102 off of here though to kind of confirm that. I'm curious if the old and new 1102s weigh the same. So let's do that as well real quick. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Come on. All right. Jesus. GEP-RC 1002 25,000, 2.6 grams. Old BetaFPV 1102 22,000, 2.8 grams. That weight difference should be bigger. New BetaFPV 1102 21,000, 2.9 grams. So tiny little bit heavier. Here's the problem with these weight measurements though. The motor wires. If the motor wires are 2 millimeters longer on one of these than the other ones, it's going to fuck this result up. And there's not a whole hell of a lot we can do about that. So yeah, the GEP-RC motor absolutely is a little bit lighter. It's not that much lighter though. I mean, keep in mind though that 0.2, 0.3 grams times 4. So that's a full gram difference. And that does make a difference. Changing a tiny whoop being 1 gram heavier or lighter, while that doesn't seem like a lot, when you think about that in like the percentage, that could be like a 5% difference, and that starts to actually make hay. So there you go, friends. Beta's new 1102 21,000 is not really a 21,000. It's closer to, like, my guess is going to be it's like 23,000, maybe 24,000 kV. Or you could say that the old 1102 is not 22,000, it's actually only 20,000. You know, this initial round of KV testing that we did here doesn't necessarily suggest that, right? Because the RC in power 22,000 turned the same unloaded RPM as the BetaFPV 1102 22,000. So it certainly seems like the deal here is that the BetaFPV, the new BetaFPV 1102 21,000 is actually 23 or 24. I don't think it's 25 because the GEP-RC 25 did a bunch of extra RPM. Maybe the GetBar-C25 is actually 28,000 kV, but regardless, the 21,000 kV 1102 is in between the 22,000 kV 1102 and the GetBar-C 1002 25,000 kV. And these are the only motors that matter for this style of rig. These are the only motors that perform well on a big, heavy 1S rig. And so 802's way too small. 1003, too big. 1102, 1002, that's where it's at. That's where you want to be. And these are the highest kV ones that there are. If there was a 28,000 kV 1102 or a 26,000 kV 1102, they would probably perform even better, but there isn't. And so these are the motors that matter. Nothing wrong with the old BetaFPV 1102 22,000. GetBar-C 1002 25 is still the champion for bi-blade 1.6s. New BetaFPV 1102 is everything else. And so if you're going to buy a motor for a heavy 1S build like this, it should be this new Beta 1102 21,000. Very impressive, BetaFPV. Great work. Thank you for giving us more power versus less. It always kills me when the new motor that somebody comes out with makes the same or less power. That's not what we want. Especially in a class of build where power is the problem. The last thing I will say is that this build sags batteries hard. And so if we never get a higher kV or bigger power motor for these, that is fine, because we've found the limit. This thing with these motors that it comes with is the limit. That's it. Don't tune it from there. Don't try to get more power out of it. All you're going to do is sag the batteries even worse and ruin all your batteries. This thing already sags the batteries pretty hard. And so this is a bind and fly that is damn near perfectly optimized. It kind of is perfectly optimized from a drivetrain standpoint. I think maybe they could have mounted the canopy better. Maybe they could have done one or two other things better. So, like, is this the absolute perfect build forever? Probably not, but it's close. This is, I feel like this is the best optimized bind and fly that we've ever seen. Certainly in Tiny Whoops. I guess you could maybe argue that, like, the Newbie Drone Hummingbird Race takes that crown, but that thing is so fucking extreme, you know? Like, but yeah, man, good God, these bind and flies are getting good. Kind of wish they weren't, so that there was more of a reason to custom build. But, like, you know, it's always good to have options. Thanks for hanging, friends. We went way long, but that's okay. We did some myth busting here today. If you like this kind of content, I can't keep doing it unless you support me. Head on over to CiottiFPV.com, join my Patreon. That is the absolute best way to support me. Use my affiliate links, change your bookmarks to my affiliate links. Buy something from my Etsy store, get yourself a t-shirt that will make people go, oh, what a jerk, but it'll make FPV people laugh. It'll make normal people say, what a jerk. That's what you want, isn't it? Yeah, support me and I'll keep supporting you and tell you what to buy and what not to buy to hopefully save you some money, and then maybe you kick me a couple of those dollars I saved you so that I can keep doing this. Cool? Tell your friends, post your favorite clips or this whole live stream to get more people testing stuff and yeah, get involved. Cool? Thanks, friends. Here's the onboard from... I played all three of these. Here's yesterday's onboard from one of the better batteries that I flew with this thing. Just, this is a Tiny Whoop. Keep that in mind. You're about to see, like, really smooth, really solid, full tilt freestyle FPV with a little kid's toy. All right. This is not the best battery that I flew of the day. That's the one that I made the edit for the patrons. So you got to give me $3 whole to see that one. But this was This is pretty good. I'll see you guys tomorrow night for some giveaways. Bye!
Yeah. Out in the yard where the grass grows wild, CiottiFPV's goggles locked, grinning like a child. Teddy spaghetti's, fur flies, and jet wash dreams. Yeah. Chasing small whoops like a dog possessed fiend. Eyes on a neon blur, hard in the chase. Big fuzz and prop spin, all tangled in place. Yeah. Four-legged rebel with a rotor stir tail in the circus of the sky. They never fail. CiottiFPV, Teddy spaghetti, dynamic duo kings, barking at the breeze, throttling at top speed, they zooming through hoops, flipping in style. That schnauzer's got throttle and a 2D smile. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sadi's on sticks, Teddy's on paws. Side by side, legends breaking all the laws. Through the kitchen, over couch scale terrain. Backyard mayhem in their flight domain. No ground too sacred, no loop too tight. Fuzz, fuel, fury ignites the night. When pilot and pup lock eyes on the prize, every whoop they conquer is a fresh cut surprise. Yeah. Yo, Sadi behind the sticks, Teddy's leading the pack. Prop guard missiles unleashed, never looking back. No leash, no map, just freestyle mic. They on the dog drone streets every day and night. Said whoops, hitting low, gotta nail the dive. Teddy push throttle up, feel the beast come alive. I see the neon arc, got the sticks locked in, Teddy. Yeah, let's rip this loop, ride the roar of the wind, Teddy. Yep. Yeah, CiottiFPV, Teddy spaghetti, coming at duo kings, barking at the breeze, throttling at top speed, zooming through hoops, flipping in style. That schnauzer's got throttle and a 2D smile. Teddy spaghetti. Barking at the breeze, throttling at top speed, zooming through hoops, flipping in style. That schnauzer's got throttle and a 2D smile. Yeah, when you hear that bar cut the rotor hum, you know Ciotti and Teddy's mission's just begun. FPVs, fur-faced legends, legends singing loud. Yeah, Teddy spaghetti and CiottiFPV.